The helicopter was still warm when they found it. The engine had been shut down according to standard protocol. The rotor blades were stationary, secured in the position pilots use when leaving an aircraft unattended. The fuel indicator showed 37% remaining. The radio was tuned to the Park Service emergency frequency. Everything about the aircraft suggested a routine landing, followed by a normal departure procedure. Except the pilot was gone. His flight helmet was on the co-pilot seat. His water bottle was in the cup holder, cap removed, half empty. His tablet computer was mounted on the instrument panel, still displaying the navigation chart for his assigned route. The seatbelt was unbuckled and hanging loose, as if he had unclipped it and stepped out of the aircraft. But there were no footprints in the soft meadow grass around the helicopter. No trail leading away from the aircraft. No indication of which direction the pilot might have gone, or why he would have landed in an unscheduled location 17 miles from his destination. His last radio transmission, recorded at the Park Service Dispatch Center, ended mid-sentence. He was reporting his position when his voice simply stopped, not interrupted, not cut off by static. The transmission ended as if someone had pressed pause on a recording. The timestamp on that transmission was 14:23. The helicopter was found at 15:07, 44 minutes later. In that 44 minutes, an experienced search and rescue pilot with more than 6,000 flight hours landed his aircraft in a remote meadow, shut down the engine, removed his helmet, took a drink of water, and vanished without leaving a single trace of where he went. His name was David Kowalczyk. He was 47 years old. He had worked as a helicopter pilot for the National Park Service for 19 years. He knew this terrain better than almost anyone alive. He has never been found. Between 2003 and 2023, 11 aircraft have been recovered from remote locations in United States national parks with no trace of their pilots or passengers. The aircraft were not crashed. They were not damaged. They had been landed intentionally, often in locations that required significant skill to access safely. And the people who flew them were simply gone. A Cessna 172 in Olympic National Park landed on a gravel bar beside a river, engine cold, doors closed, 4 passengers and 1 pilot missing without a trace, seatbelts unbuckled, personal belongings still in the cabin, a child stuffed animal on the rear seat, a powered paraglider in Canyonlands, the wing found neatly folded beside the motor unit, the pilot's helmet placed carefully on top, a GoPro camera still attached and still recording, 14 hours of footage showing nothing but empty desert, and a wing that no one returned to retrieve. A hot air balloon in Great Smoky Mountains, the envelope deflated and lying across a ridgeline, the basket upright and undamaged, 3 passengers and 1 pilot gone. Champagne glasses still in the holders, a bottle of sparkling wine still cold. An ultralight aircraft in Denali, discovered by climbers on a glacier, the pilot's seat empty, the engine out of fuel but showing no signs of emergency shutdown, no footprints in the snow for a quarter mile in any direction. These are not crash investigations. There were no crashes. These are missing persons cases involving aircraft that landed safely, and pilots who disappeared as if they had never existed. The Federal Aviation Administration has investigated each incident. The National Transportation Safety Board has reviewed the evidence. The National Park Service Investigative Services Branch has conducted searches that covered hundreds of square miles. None of them have found the missing pilots. None of them have explained how people can vanish from aircraft that show no signs of distress. None of them have answered the question that families have been asking for years. Where did they go? Subscribe now and turn on notifications. What follows has been assembled from FAA incident reports, NTSB investigation files, court documents, Freedom of Information Act requests, and interviews with family members and investigators who have spent years trying to understand how pilots can land aircraft safely and then disappear without a trace. The evidence is documented. The aircraft are real, the disappearances are unexplained, and no one in any official capacity has ever been able to explain what happened to the people who were flying them. The first case involves a helicopter pilot named David Kowalczyk and a meadow in Yellowstone National Park where he landed his aircraft and stepped out of existence. David Kowalczyk had been flying helicopters since he was 22 years old. He started in the Army, completing 2 tours in Afghanistan as a medevac pilot. After his military service, he transitioned to civilian work, first with a hospital air ambulance service in Montana, then with the National Park Service beginning in 2004. By the time of his disappearance on August 17, 2019, he had logged more than 6,200 flight hours, including more than 3,000 in the Yellowstone region. He held certifications for instrument flight, mountain operations, and search and rescue. His personnel file, obtained through FOIA by his family, contained no disciplinary actions, no safety violations, no incidents of any kind. His supervisor at the time, Chief Pilot Margaret Holloway, provided a statement to investigators that was included in the case file. David was the most reliable pilot I have ever worked with. He followed procedures exactly. He never took unnecessary risks. If there was a pilot I would trust to handle any situation, it was David. On the morning of August 17th, David was assigned to transport a Park Service geologist to a remote monitoring station in the Beckler River region, in the southwest corner of Yellowstone. The flight was routine. He had made the same trip dozens of times. The weather was clear, with visibility exceeding 20 miles and winds under 10 knots. He departed the Lake Ranger Station helipad at 13:45 with the geologist, Dr. Patricia Simmons, aboard. The flight to the monitoring station would take approximately 35 minutes. At 14:08, David radioed dispatch to report that he was approximately 15 minutes from destination. Everything normal. At 14:23, he radioed again. This transmission was recorded and has been analyzed extensively by FAA investigators and independent audio specialists. The recording begins. Yellowstone Dispatch. This is Hotel 27, position update. I'm currently at... The transmission ends there. No static, no interference, no indication of equipment malfunction. The audio simply stops, as if the pilot had released the transmit button in the middle of the word. Dispatch attempted to re-establish contact. There was no response. Standard protocol for lost contact with an aircraft requires an immediate response. At 14:27, 4 minutes after the interrupted transmission, a second helicopter was dispatched from Lake Ranger Station to search for Hotel 27 along its planned route. At 15:07, the search helicopter located David Kowalczyk's aircraft in a high-altitude meadow approximately 17 miles from his destination. The meadow was not on his planned route. Reaching it would have required a significant deviation from the direct path to the monitoring station. The search pilot, whose name has been redacted from publicly released documents, reported what he observed via radio. His transmission was also recorded. I have visual on Hotel 27. Aircraft is on the ground in a meadow, appears undamaged. Rotor is stationary. No movement visible. I'm going to set down nearby. The search pilot landed approximately 100 feet from David's helicopter. What he found when he approached the aircraft has been documented in the official incident report. Case number FAA NW 2019-0817. The helicopter was intact. There was no damage to the airframe, the rotor assembly, or any visible components. The landing had been executed properly, with the aircraft positioned on level ground and oriented into the prevailing wind, exactly as training protocols specify. The engine had been shut down using the standard procedure. The fuel mixture was in cutoff. The magnetos were off. The master switch was off. The rotor brake was engaged. Every step of the shutdown checklist had been completed in the correct order. The pilot's door was closed, but not latched. The passenger door on the opposite side was also closed. The cabin was empty. David Kowalczyk was not in the helicopter. Dr. Patricia Simmons was not in the helicopter. Both seats showed signs of recent occupancy. The pilot's seatbelt was unbuckled and hanging to the side. The passenger seatbelt was in the same position. David's flight helmet was on the co-pilot seat. His tablet computer was still mounted on the instrument panel, still powered on, still displaying the navigation chart. His water bottle was in the cup holder, cap removed, approximately half full. Dr. Simmons's backpack was in the rear cargo area. Her geological sample kit was beside it. Her phone was in the front pocket of the backpack, battery at 63%. There was no sign of either person outside the aircraft. The search pilot walked a perimeter around the helicopter, looking for tracks, footprints, or any indication of where the missing individuals might have gone. The meadow was covered in soft grass that would have shown clear evidence of foot traffic. There were no footprints, none leading away from the helicopter, none anywhere in the visible meadow except for those made by the search pilot himself. His report states, "I circled the aircraft 3 times at increasing distances. The grass is approximately 8 to 10 inches high and would clearly show any disturbance from walking. I found no tracks of any kind leading away from Hotel 27. It is as if the occupants exited the aircraft and then ceased to exist. Within 2 hours, a full search operation was underway. Ground teams were deployed via helicopter to establish a search perimeter. Dogs were brought in from the park's K9 unit. Thermal imaging equipment was deployed as daylight began to fade. The dogs could not find a scent trail. They circled the helicopter repeatedly, clearly detecting the presence of people who had recently been in the aircraft, but could not determine which direction those people had gone. The handler's report states, both dogs exhibited confusion behavior consistent with a scent that ends without continuing in any direction. This is not typical of tracking scenarios where subjects have departed on foot. Thermal imaging found nothing. The surrounding terrain was searched until well after dark. No heat signatures consistent with human bodies were detected anywhere within a 2-mile radius of the helicopter. The search expanded over the following days. More than 200 personnel participated at various stages. Teams covered more than 60 square miles of some of the most remote terrain in Yellowstone. Rivers and streams were searched for any sign of bodies. Abandoned structures and cave formations in the area were checked. Nothing was found. The helicopter was examined by FAA mechanical inspectors. No defects were found. The engine, transmission, and flight controls were all functioning properly. The fuel was tested and found to be uncontaminated. There was no mechanical reason for the aircraft to have made an unscheduled landing. The investigation report, portions of which were released through FOIA in 2021, contains a section titled Anomalous Findings that has never been publicly explained. According to the report, the helicopter's onboard flight recorder captured data that investigators found difficult to interpret. The recorder logs altitude, airspeed, heading, engine parameters, and control inputs at 1-second intervals. The data shows Hotel 27 proceeding normally along its planned route until 14:22 and 47 seconds. At that moment, the aircraft's altitude reading changed from 8,400 feet to 4,200 feet instantaneously. Not a descent, not a controlled maneuver. The aircraft was at one altitude, and then it was at another altitude 4,200 feet lower, with no transition recorded between the two readings. The airspeed reading at the same timestamp shows a change from 93 knots to 0. The heading changed from 247 degrees to 182 degrees. The engine RPM dropped from cruise power to idle. All of these changes occurred in the same 1-second interval. All of them are physically impossible under normal flight conditions. The FAA's analysis of this data, contained in a supplemental report that was heavily redacted before release, states, the recorded flight data shows discontinuities that are not consistent with known aircraft performance characteristics or any documented instrument malfunction pattern. The simultaneous instantaneous changes in multiple parameters suggests either catastrophic data corruption or an event outside normal operational parameters. The report does not speculate about what kind of event might cause such readings. It simply notes that the data cannot be explained and moves on to other aspects of the investigation. There was one additional anomaly that has received less attention in official documentation, but was described by a source within the investigation, who spoke to researchers on condition of anonymity. According to this source, when investigators examined the interior of the helicopter in detail, they found something that did not match the inventory of items known to be aboard the aircraft. On the floor of the cabin, beneath the pilot's seat, there was a small pile of what appeared to be sand. The sand was fine-grained, pale gray in color, and completely dry. It weighed approximately 4 ounces. The meadow where the helicopter landed doesn't contain sand. The soil is dark volcanic earth covered by vegetation. The nearest sand deposits of any kind are more than 40 miles away. The sand was collected as evidence and sent to a laboratory for analysis. The results of that analysis have never been released. Multiple FOIA requests for the laboratory report have been denied on grounds that the information is part of an ongoing investigation. The source who described this finding told researchers nobody could explain where that sand came from. It wasn't consistent with anything in the area. One of the geologists on the search team looked at it and said it didn't match any formation he knew of in Yellowstone. It looked more like beach sand, like something you'd find on a coast somewhere. But we were in a meadow at 8,000 feet in the middle of Wyoming. There's no beach sand for 1,000 miles. The source continued, "The official report doesn't mention the sand. I don't know why. Maybe they decided it wasn't relevant. Maybe they couldn't explain it and didn't want to include something they couldn't explain. But it was there. I saw them bag it. And as far as I know, no one ever figured out where it came from or why it was in that helicopter." David Kowalczyk was married. His wife Sandra was a teacher at a middle school in Bozeman, Montana. They had 2 children, a son aged 14 and a daughter aged 11 at the time of his disappearance. Sandra has spent the years since her husband's disappearance seeking answers. She has filed numerous FOIA requests. She has retained attorneys. She has contacted FAA officials, NTSB investigators, and elected representatives. She has appeared in documentary films and given interviews to journalists covering unexplained disappearances. In an interview conducted in 2022, Sandra said, "My husband flew helicopters for 25 years. He survived 2 combat tours. He performed hundreds of search and rescue missions in some of the most dangerous terrain in the country. He knew what he was doing. He would never have landed in an unplanned location without a reason, and he would never have left his aircraft without a reason." Something happened to him. Something happened to Dr. Simmons. The helicopter was fine. The weather was fine. They landed safely. And then they were just gone. How does that happen? How do 2 people disappear from a helicopter in the middle of the afternoon without anyone seeing anything, without leaving any footprints, without any trace at all? She continued, "They told me the case is still open. They've been telling me that for 3 years. But nothing is happening. No one is looking anymore. No one is investigating. They just filed it away as unexplained and moved on. My husband deserves better than that. Dr. Simmons deserves better than that. Their families deserve to know what happened." Dr. Patricia Simmons was 38 years old at the time of her disappearance. She was a volcanologist employed by the United States Geological Survey, assigned to the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory. She had been monitoring geothermal activity in the park for 7 years. Her husband, Dr. Robert Simmons, also a geologist, has been less publicly vocal than Sandra Kowalczyk, but has pursued similar avenues seeking information. In a statement provided to a documentary filmmaker in 2021, he said, "Patricia called me that morning before she left. She said it was a routine trip, nothing special. She said she'd be back by dinner. That was the last time I heard her voice. The next thing I knew, they were telling me the helicopter had been found, but Patricia wasn't in it. They couldn't tell me where she was. They couldn't tell me what happened. They still can't. I have accepted that I may never know what happened to my wife, but I have not accepted that no one seems interested in finding out." The investigation into the disappearance of David Kowalczyk and Patricia Simmons has been classified under multiple designations. The FAA portion is case number FAA NW 2019-0817. The NTSB investigation is WPR 19LA 347. The Park Service case is ISB 190842. None of these investigations have produced conclusions. None have identified suspects or causes. None have located the missing individuals or their remains. The helicopter, Hotel 27, was eventually returned to service after being cleared by FAA inspectors. It flew routine missions in Yellowstone for another 18 months before being transferred to a Park Service unit in Alaska. The aircraft showed no lasting effects from whatever occurred on August 17, 2019. But the meadow where it landed has been removed from official maps distributed to the public. Rangers are reportedly discouraged from flying over the area. A source within the Park Service told researchers that the location is informally referred to as the quiet place among staff who know about the incident. No official explanation has been offered for why a meadow where nothing officially happened would require unofficial avoidance. 7 months before David Kowalczyk's helicopter landed in that meadow and its occupants vanished, a small aircraft carrying 5 people made an emergency landing in Olympic National Park and created a mystery that investigators have never been able to solve. The aircraft was a Cessna 172 Skyhawk, registration number N7342 Papa. It was operated by a charter company based in Port Angeles, Washington, that provided scenic flights over the Olympic Peninsula and surrounding areas. On January 14, 2019, the aircraft departed Port Angeles at 10:15 in the morning with 1 pilot and 4 passengers aboard. The passengers were members of a single family, a couple in their 50s and their 2 adult children, a son aged 26 and a daughter aged 23. They had booked the flight as a birthday gift for the mother, who was turning 55. The pilot was Raymond Esperanza, age 34. He had been flying for the charter company for 3 years. His total flight time was approximately 1,800 hours. His record was clean. Former colleagues described him as careful and professional. The planned route would take the aircraft over the Elwha Valley, around the peaks of the Olympic Mountains, and back to Port Angeles. Total flight time was estimated at approximately 90 minutes. Weather conditions were marginal, but within acceptable limits. Ceiling was approximately 4,000 feet with scattered clouds. Visibility was reported as 8 miles. Winds were from the southwest at 15 knots. The flight proceeded normally for the first 40 minutes. Raymond made position reports at 10:30 and 10:50, both indicating normal operations. His voice on the recordings was calm and showed no signs of distress. At 11:03, he made his final transmission. The transmission was recorded by Seattle Center, the FAA facility handling traffic in the area. The recording has been analyzed extensively. Raymond's voice says, "Seattle Center, 7342 Papa, I'm experiencing, there's something, I need to." The transmission ends. Unlike the Kowalczyk case, there is audio artifact at the end of this recording. Analysts describe it as a low-frequency pulse lasting approximately 2 seconds, followed by silence. The pulse has been characterized as consistent with electromagnetic interference, but no source for such interference was identified. Seattle Center attempted to re-establish contact. There was no response. Radar contact with N7342 Papa was lost at 11:03 and approximately 20 seconds. The aircraft was at 4,800 feet over the Quinault River drainage when it disappeared from radar. Search and rescue operations were initiated immediately. Aircraft from the Coast Guard, Civil Air Patrol, and Park Service began searching the area within the hour. Ground teams were deployed via helicopter to locations along the flight path. The aircraft was found at 13:42, approximately 2 hours and 40 minutes after the last transmission. It was not where anyone expected it to be. N7342 Papa was located on a gravel bar beside the Hoh River, approximately 18 miles northwest of the position where radar contact was lost. The aircraft was intact. It had been landed on the gravel bar in a controlled manner, aligned with the river, using the available space efficiently. The landing gear showed no damage. The propeller was undamaged. The airframe was intact. It was an impressive piece of flying. Landing a Cessna on a river gravel bar requires skill and judgment. The pilot had chosen the location well and executed the landing properly. The aircraft was empty. All 5 seatbelts were unbuckled and hanging loose. The pilot's door was closed. The passenger doors were closed. The engine had been shut down using the normal procedure. The keys were in the ignition, turned to the off position. Personal belongings were still in the cabin. The mother's purse was on the rear seat. The father's wallet was in the pocket of a jacket hanging on the back of his seat. The daughter's phone was in the seat pocket in front of her. The son's camera, a professional model worth several $1,000s, was in a bag beside him. The pilot's flight bag was behind his seat, containing his charts, logbook, and personal items. Nothing appeared to have been taken. Nothing appeared to have been disturbed. 5 people had landed an aircraft, turned off the engine, and departed without taking any of their possessions. And they had done so without leaving any tracks. The gravel bar where the aircraft was found is composed of river rocks ranging from pebble-sized to several inches in diameter. Movement across such a surface leaves visible disturbance. The rocks shift. Patterns are disrupted. Tracks are clearly visible even without trained observation. Search and rescue personnel who arrived at the scene found no tracks leading away from the aircraft. None leading to the tree line. None leading to the river. None anywhere on the gravel bar except those created by the search team itself. The search coordinator's report, obtained through FOIA, contains a notation that has never been explained. Visual inspection of gravel surface revealed apparent compression pattern surrounding aircraft consistent with downward pressure rather than horizontal movement. Pattern extended approximately 30 feet from aircraft in all directions. No footprints visible within or beyond pattern boundary. The report does not elaborate on what could cause a compression pattern consistent with downward pressure across a 30-foot radius around a small aircraft. The search for the missing pilot and passengers continued for 19 days. Teams searched more than 40 square miles of wilderness. The Ho River was searched downstream for any sign of bodies. Tributaries were checked. Abandoned structures in the area were investigated. Nothing was found. The family of the missing passengers, the Hendersons, have filed multiple lawsuits seeking access to investigation records. They have been represented by attorneys who specialize in aviation incidents. Their legal efforts have produced limited results. In a statement released through their attorney in 2021, the Henderson family said, "Our parents and our siblings went on a scenic flight to celebrate our mother's birthday. They never came home. We were told there was no crash, no mechanical failure, no weather event, no explanation of any kind. The pilot landed the plane safely, turned off the engine, and then all 5 people simply vanished. We have spent 3 years asking how this is possible, and no one can tell us. We have spent 3 years asking where our family went, and no one knows. We refuse to accept that 4 people can board an aircraft in a modern country with radar and radio and all the technology we have, and simply disappear without anyone knowing what happened to them." The pilot, Raymond Esperanza, had no family in the United States. His parents lived in the Philippines. They have not spoken publicly about his disappearance. The Cessna was eventually recovered from the gravel bar and returned to the charter company. Mechanical inspection revealed no defects. The aircraft was sold to a private buyer in 2020 and is reportedly still in service. There was one additional piece of evidence recovered from the aircraft that has never been publicly disclosed. According to a source who participated in the investigation, the daughter's phone contained a video file that was recording at the time the aircraft lost radar contact. The phone had been in her hand when she started the video, apparently intending to capture scenic footage from the flight. The video is 4 minutes and 12 seconds long. The first 3 minutes show normal flight footage: mountains, clouds, the wingtip visible at the edge of frame, voices in the background, conversation between family members, laughter. At the 3-minute and 7-second mark, the video shows what the source described as a visual distortion that I cannot explain. The image appears to stretch and compress simultaneously. The colors shift into spectrums that the source said did not look like normal video artifacts. For approximately 18 seconds, the video shows nothing recognizable. Not static, not corruption, something else that the source would not describe in detail. Then the video shows the interior of the aircraft. Empty. The seats are visible. The windows are visible. There is no one in the aircraft. The video continues for another 47 seconds, showing the empty cabin before the recording ends. The source stated, That video shows the aircraft empty while it was still in flight. The exterior footage shows they were still in the air. Then whatever happened, happened. Then the interior footage shows no one in any of the seats. But the aircraft had not landed yet. According to radar data, the aircraft did not descend to its landing site until at least 4 minutes after that video ended. So either the video timeline is wrong, which analysis says it is not, or those people were gone from the aircraft before it landed. The source would not speculate about the implications of this finding. The video has not been released. FOIA requests for the footage have been denied. The investigations remain open. The case numbers are FAA NW 2019-01-14, NTSB WPR 19 FA 029, and ISB 1901-17. No conclusions have been reached. No explanations have been offered. No remains have been found. 5 people boarded an aircraft on a January morning. The aircraft was found hours later, safely landed, engine off, doors closed, seats empty. Where they went remains unknown. 2 cases, 2 aircraft, 7 missing people, and a pattern of evidence that does not fit any conventional explanation. Aircraft that landed safely in remote locations with no mechanical problems and no apparent emergency. Pilots and passengers who departed those aircraft without taking their belongings. No tracks, no trails, no indication of where they went. Evidence of something. Compression patterns and sand deposits and electromagnetic pulses and video footage showing empty cabins that investigators have noted but cannot explain. The geographic distribution of these cases is notable. David Kowalczyk disappeared in Yellowstone, in the park's remote southwest corner. The Henderson family and their pilot disappeared in Olympic National Park, in the Hoh River drainage. Both locations are characterized by dense wilderness, difficult terrain, and limited accessibility. Both locations have histories of unexplained disappearances that predate these aviation incidents by decades. Researchers who study anomalous disappearances in national parks have noted that certain areas appear repeatedly in case files. The Bechler region of Yellowstone, the Hoh River drainage in Olympic. These are places where people have vanished under circumstances that defy conventional explanation, long before aircraft began disappearing there as well. Whether this geographic correlation is meaningful or coincidental remains unknown. No official investigation has examined the pattern. No federal agency has acknowledged that such a pattern exists, but the families of the missing have noticed, and they continue to ask questions that no one seems willing to answer. In Part 2, we examine additional cases in this pattern. A powered paraglider in Utah, whose pilot vanished, but whose camera kept recording for 14 hours. A hot air balloon in Tennessee that descended with its passengers gone and its champagne still cold. An ultralight aircraft on a glacier in Alaska where no footprints disturbed the snow. The aircraft keep landing. The pilots keep disappearing. And no one has been able to explain what is happening in the skies above America's national parks. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The evidence is documented. The cases are real. And somewhere, sealed in investigation files across multiple federal agencies, there may be answers that no one is willing to share. The aircraft are still out there. The questions remain. What happened to the pilots? Where did they go? And could it happen again? The camera recorded for 14 hours. The pilot never came back. This is not an estimate. This is the precise duration documented in the metadata of a GoPro Hero 7 recovered from a powered paraglider in Canyonlands National Park on October 3, 2020. The camera was found still attached to the aircraft's frame, still recording, battery nearly depleted, capturing 14 hours of empty desert, while the man who had been flying the aircraft was nowhere to be found. The paraglider was discovered by a group of hikers on a remote mesa approximately 11 miles from the nearest road. The wing was neatly folded beside the motor unit. The pilot's helmet was placed on top of the folded wing. His gloves were inside the helmet. His flight suit jacket was folded beside the motor. Everything was arranged as if the pilot had landed, carefully secured his equipment, removed his gear, and prepared to depart on foot. Except there were no footprints leading away from the aircraft, no trail through the desert scrub, no indication of which direction he might have gone. And the camera had recorded everything, or rather, it had recorded nothing. 14 hours of footage showing a folded wing, a helmet, and empty desert. No movement, no visitors, no return of the pilot who had flown that aircraft to a mesa in the middle of nowhere and then vanished. His name was Gabriel Okonkwo. He was 31 years old. He had been flying powered paragliders for 6 years. He had logged more than 800 flight hours. He knew what he was doing. He has never been found. In Part 1, we examined 2 cases where aircraft were found intact in national parks with their pilots and passengers missing. A helicopter in Yellowstone, whose pilot and passenger vanished from a meadow without leaving footprints. A Cessna in Olympic National Park, where 5 people disappeared from a gravel bar, their belongings still in the cabin, no tracks visible on the rocks. The pattern continues, the evidence accumulates, and the explanations remain absent. A hot air balloon in Great Smoky Mountains descended to a ridgeline with its basket undamaged and its passengers gone. Champagne glasses still in their holders. A bottle of sparkling wine still cold to the touch when searchers arrived. An ultralight aircraft on a glacier in Denali, discovered by climbers with its engine out of fuel and its pilot's seat empty. No footprints in the snow. No disturbance of any kind within a quarter mile of the aircraft. These cases share common elements that investigators have noted but cannot explain. Aircraft that landed safely. Pilots who departed without their equipment. No evidence of where they went. And anomalies in the physical evidence that do not fit any conventional scenario. Subscribe now and turn on notifications. What follows has been assembled from FAA records, National Transportation Safety Board files, Park Service investigation documents, and interviews with family members and witnesses who have spent years seeking answers that no one can provide. The first case in this part involves a paraglider pilot named Gabriel Okonkwo and a camera that recorded 14 hours of nothing while waiting for someone who never returned. Gabriel Okonkwo was born in Lagos, Nigeria, and immigrated to the United States with his family when he was 12 years old. He grew up in Denver, Colorado, and developed a passion for flight that began with model aircraft and eventually led to powered paragliding. By 2020, he had established himself as one of the most experienced paramotor pilots in the southwestern United States. He held instructor certifications from 2 international organizations. He had completed expeditions across 4 continents. His YouTube channel documenting his flights had more than 90,000 subscribers. On September 29, 2020, Gabriel arrived at a campground near the island in the Sky District of Canyonlands National Park. He had permits for a 4-day solo camping and flying expedition. His plan was to launch from various locations within the park, capturing aerial footage for a documentary project he was developing about the Colorado Plateau. He checked in with the ranger station on September 29th and again on September 30th. Both check-ins were routine. He reported good flying conditions and successful footage capture. On October 1st, he did not check in. Rangers attempted to contact him via the emergency radio he was required to carry. There was no response. A welfare check was initiated on October 2nd. His campsite was found intact. His tent was standing. His vehicle was parked where he had left it. His camping equipment showed signs of normal use through the morning of October 1st, including a coffee cup beside the extinguished fire ring that still contained residue consistent with recent use. His paramotor was not at the campsite. He had apparently launched that morning and not returned. The search began immediately. Aircraft were deployed to scan the park from above. Ground teams spread out along likely flight paths. The terrain in Canyonlands is dramatic, but also relatively open, with good visibility across the mesas and canyons. An aircraft or a person on the ground should have been visible from the air. Nothing was spotted on October 2nd. On October 3rd, a group of hikers on a remote mesa called Murphy Point reported finding aviation equipment approximately 200 yards from the trail. The location was more than 11 miles from Gabriel's campsite and in a direction that made little sense given his stated filming plans. Rangers reached the site by helicopter at 14:23. What they found has been documented in case file ISB 2010-03 and FAA Incident Report FAA SW 2010-01. The paramotor was positioned on a flat section of the mesa, approximately 50 feet from the rim. The motor unit, a Fresh Breeze Simonini with approximately 200 hours of operation, was upright and undamaged. The fuel tank was empty, which was consistent with the flight duration from the campsite to this location. The wing, a Dudek Universal 26-meter model, was folded beside the motor unit. The folding was precise, following the technique that pilots use when packing wings for transport. It was not the hasty bundling that might result from an emergency landing. It was methodical, careful, the work of someone who intended to fly again. Gabriel's helmet was placed on top of the folded wing. His gloves were inside the helmet. His flight jacket was folded beside the motor. His reserve parachute was still attached to the harness, properly secured, showing no signs of deployment. The GoPro camera was still attached to the motor frame, still recording. Rangers noted the recording indicator light was blinking, showing that the camera was active. They did not stop the recording. They secured the scene and waited for investigators. The camera was recovered by an NTSB field investigator who arrived at 17:45. The recording was stopped at that time. Total recording duration was 14 hours, 23 minutes, and 17 seconds. The footage has been analyzed by investigators, and portions of the analysis have been released through FOIA requests filed by Gabriel's family. The recording begins at 03:22 on October 1st, when Gabriel apparently activated the camera before his pre-dawn launch. The first 47 minutes show his flight from the campsite area across the park. The footage is spectacular. Red rock formations, the Colorado River winding through canyons below, the sun rising over the distant mountains. Gabriel's voice is audible at several points, narrating his flight for the documentary. His tone is relaxed, enthusiastic. He describes the landscape below. He mentions the light conditions. He expresses satisfaction with the footage he is capturing. At 04:09, his narration stops mid-sentence. He is describing the view to the west when his voice simply stops, not interrupted, not cut off by wind noise or engine sound. He stops speaking as if he has seen something that made him forget what he was saying. The camera is forward-facing, mounted on the motor frame, so it does not show Gabriel himself. It shows the landscape ahead. At the moment his voice stops, the footage shows nothing unusual. Desert, mesas, the same terrain that had been visible throughout the flight. For the next 3 minutes, the footage shows the aircraft descending. The descent appears controlled. The wing remains stable. There is no indication of mechanical failure or loss of control. Gabriel is simply landing. At 04:12, the aircraft touches down on the mesa where it would later be found. The landing is smooth. The motor continues running for approximately 30 seconds as the wing settles behind the aircraft. Then the motor stops. The footage from this point forward shows the folded wing entering the frame as Gabriel apparently packs his equipment. His hands are briefly visible. The wing is folded. The helmet is placed. The jacket is removed and folded. At 04:19, Gabriel's boots are visible at the edge of the frame. He appears to be standing beside the aircraft. At 04:20, his boots are no longer visible. The camera continues recording for 14 more hours. The footage shows the wing, the helmet, the desert, the sun rising higher, crossing the sky, beginning to descend toward evening. Shadows lengthen. Light changes. Nothing moves. No one appears. No one returns. The footage shows no indication of Gabriel walking away. There is no moment where he moves out of frame in a particular direction. His boots are visible. Then his boots are not visible. The transition takes less than 1 second. Investigators have analyzed this section of the footage extensively. The analysis, portions of which were included in the FOIA release, states, frame-by-frame examination of the footage between timestamp 04:1947 and 04:20:03 shows the subject's boots present in frame. followed by absence of boots, with no transitional movement visible. The camera frame rate of 60 frames per second should capture any normal walking movement. No such movement is recorded. The report continues. One possible explanation is that the subject moved in a direction directly away from the camera, perpendicular to the lens axis, which could theoretically allow departure from frame without visible lateral movement. However, examination of the surrounding terrain indicates that this direction would have led directly to the mesa rim, a sheer drop of approximately 300 feet. No evidence of a fall was found below the rim. The ground around the paramotor was examined for tracks. The mesa surface is a combination of sandstone and loose dirt that would show clear evidence of foot traffic. No tracks were found leading away from the aircraft. The ranger who conducted the initial scene examination wrote in her report, "I walked a perimeter around the equipment at distances of 10, 20, and 50 feet. The ground surface clearly shows my footprints. I found no other footprints anywhere in the area. The pilot's boots were aviation style with distinctive tread. Such boots would leave clear impressions. No such impressions exist outside the immediate vicinity of the aircraft." The search for Gabriel Okonkwo continued for 16 days. Teams covered more than 30 square miles of some of the most remote terrain in Canyonlands. The mesa where his equipment was found was searched repeatedly. The canyon below the rim was searched for evidence of a fall. Rivers and drainages in the area were checked. Nothing was found. Gabriel's family has pursued answers through every available channel. His brother, Dr. Emmanuel Okonkwo, a physician in Denver, has filed multiple FOIA requests and retained legal counsel to seek access to investigation records. In an interview in 2022, Dr. Okonkwo said, "My brother was an expert pilot. He documented everything. He had a camera recording continuously. That camera shows him landing, packing his equipment, standing beside his aircraft. Then it shows him gone, not walking away, not leaving, gone, in less than a second. And the camera kept recording for 14 hours afterward, and in all that time, nothing moved, no one came, and my brother never returned. I have watched that footage. I have watched my brother's boots disappear from the frame. I do not understand what I am seeing. No one can explain it to me." The case remains open. The file numbers are ISB 20010-03, FAA SW 2020-10-01, and NTSB reference DAN 20LA427. Gabriel Okonkwo remains officially missing. His paramotor was returned to his family. His camera footage exists in evidence storage, 14 hours of empty desert waiting for someone who never came back. 3 weeks after Gabriel Okonkwo's boots disappeared from a camera frame in Canyonlands, a hot air balloon descended in Great Smoky Mountains National Park under circumstances that have never been explained. The balloon was operated by a company called Smoky Mountain Balloon Adventures, based in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. The company had been conducting scenic flights over the national park and surrounding areas for 11 years with a perfect safety record. On October 24, 2020, the balloon launched at 06:15 for a sunrise flight. Aboard were the pilot, a 43-year-old man named William Tran, and 3 passengers, a married couple celebrating their 30th anniversary and the couple's adult daughter, who had arranged the flight as a gift. The passengers were Margaret and Donald Ashworth, ages 58 and 61, and their daughter Christine Ashworth Reed, age 34. They had traveled from their home in Ohio specifically for this experience. William Tran was an experienced balloon pilot with more than 2,000 flight hours. He had flown the same model of balloon, a Cameron A210, for 7 years. His certifications were current. His medical was valid. His colleagues described him as meticulous about safety. The flight proceeded normally for the first hour. William made radio contact with his ground crew at 06:45 and 07:15, both times reporting normal operations and excellent visibility. The weather was ideal for ballooning. Calm winds, clear skies, temperatures in the low 50s. At 07:32, William made his final radio transmission. The transmission was recorded by the ground crew's radio. William's voice says, Ground team, this is Smoky 1. I'm at 4,200 feet over the Lufty area, starting descent for landing. Hold on. There's something. The transmission ends. The ground crew attempted to re-establish contact. There was no response. The ground crew immediately began driving toward the area William had indicated. They also contacted Park Dispatch to report a potential emergency. The balloon was located at 0817 by the ground crew. It had descended onto a ridgeline approximately 3 miles from where William reported beginning his descent. The envelope was deflated and lying across the ridge, draped over trees and rocks. The basket was upright and appeared undamaged. The basket was empty. The ground crew, consisting of 2 employees who had worked with William for several years, documented what they found while waiting for emergency responders. The basket showed no signs of damage or disturbance. The burner assembly was intact. The fuel tanks showed approximately 30% remaining propane, consistent with a flight of the expected duration. The pilot's instruments were functioning normally. Personal belongings were still in the basket. Mrs. Ashworth's purse was hanging from a hook on the interior wall. Mr. Ashworth's jacket was folded on the bench seat. Christine's camera bag was on the floor of the basket. And in the center of the basket, in a wooden rack designed for the purpose, there were 4 champagne glasses. The glasses were upright. 3 of them contained champagne. The 4th was empty, but showed residue indicating it had recently been used. Beside the glasses, in an insulated holder, was a bottle of sparkling wine. The bottle had been opened. Approximately 1/3 of the contents remained. One of the ground crew members, in his statement to investigators, described touching the bottle. I picked it up without thinking. It was cold. Not cool, cold, like it had just come out of a refrigerator. But the flight had been going for almost 2 hours by that point. There was no refrigeration in the basket. There's no way that bottle should have still been cold. The same crew member noted another detail that troubled him. The champagne in the 3 glasses had not gone flat. When champagne sits exposed to air, it loses carbonation within minutes. The glasses had been poured, but the champagne still showed visible effervescence when the crew arrived. He told investigators, "I know champagne. I have been doing these flights for 6 years. When you pour champagne, it goes flat fast, especially in the open air in a balloon basket. Those glasses looked like they had just been poured. But the pilot's last transmission was almost 45 minutes before we got there. The math does not work." This detail was noted in the investigation file. A supplemental analysis attempted to determine how long the bottle could have remained cold under the ambient conditions. The analysis concluded that a bottle removed from refrigeration at the start of the flight would have reached ambient temperature within approximately 45 minutes. The bottle was still cold after nearly 2 hours. The investigator's note on this finding reads, "Temperature anomaly cannot be explained by standard thermal dynamics. Possible explanations include insulation properties of the holder exceeding manufacturer specifications or unknown environmental factors affecting thermal transfer." The note does not suggest what unknown environmental factors might cause a bottle to remain cold for longer than physics would predict. The search for William Tran and the 3 passengers began immediately. The ridgeline where the balloon descended was searched on foot. Helicopters flew patterns over the surrounding terrain. Dogs were brought in to search for scent trails. The dogs found nothing. The handler's report, included in the case file, states, "Both dogs clearly indicated scent presence in the basket consistent with recent human occupancy." Upon exiting the basket, both dogs exhibited searching behavior, but could not establish a direction of travel. The scent appears to end at the basket edge. This pattern is not consistent with any normal tracking scenario I have encountered in 19 years of search and rescue work. The terrain surrounding the balloon was examined for tracks or disturbance. The ridgeline is heavily forested, with a ground cover of leaves and undergrowth that would show clear evidence of passage. No tracks were found leading away from the basket. No disturbance in the vegetation. No broken branches or displaced leaves, suggesting that 4 people had exited the basket and walked into the forest. The search continued for 21 days. Teams covered more than 50 square miles. Rivers and streams in the area were searched. caves, and rock formations were checked. Abandoned structures throughout the region were investigated. Nothing was found. No clothing, no personal effects, no remains. Christine Ashworth Reed's husband, Michael Reed, has been the primary spokesperson for the families seeking answers. In a statement provided to media in 2021, he said, "My wife went up in a balloon with her parents to celebrate their anniversary. The balloon came down with no one in it. The champagne was still cold. Their belongings were still there. They just were not there. The pilot says there's something and then disappears. My wife disappears. Her parents disappear. And no one can tell me where they went. No one can tell me how 4 people can vanish from a balloon basket while it's landing. No one can explain why the champagne was still cold, or why there were no footprints, or why the dogs couldn't find a trail. I am not asking for theories. I am asking for my wife. I am asking for her parents, and no one can give them back to me. The case remains open. The file numbers are ISB 20010-24, FAA SO 2020-10-24, and NTSB reference ATL 21LA017. The balloon company ceased operations in 2021. The equipment was sold. The basket where 4 people were last seen alive is reportedly in storage at a facility in Tennessee, held as evidence in a case that has produced whatever. 5 months after the balloon incident in Tennessee, an ultralight aircraft was discovered on a glacier in Denali National Park, under circumstances that investigators have characterized as inexplicable. The aircraft was a Kolb Firestar 2, a single-seat ultralight with a maximum speed of approximately 60 miles per hour. It was registered to a man named Eric Lindqvist, a 56-year-old retired airline captain from Anchorage, Alaska. Eric had flown commercially for 31 years, retiring in 2018 with more than 22,000 flight hours. After retirement, he had pursued his passion for ultralight aviation, which he described to friends as real flying, the way it was meant to be. On March 15, 2021, Eric departed from a private airstrip near Talkeetna for a flight into Denali National Park. His filed flight plan indicated he intended to fly along the Ruth Glacier, photograph the Great Gorge, and return to Talkeetna. Total planned flight time was approximately 3 hours. Weather conditions were excellent for winter flying in Alaska. Clear skies, light winds, temperatures around 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Eric had extensive cold weather flying experience and was properly equipped for the conditions. He did not return. His wife reported him overdue at 1700 when he had not returned by his expected arrival time. Search operations were initiated immediately, with aircraft from the Alaska Air National Guard and Civil Air Patrol searching along his planned route before darkness forced suspension of operations. The following morning, March 16th, an Air National Guard helicopter crew spotted the ultralight on the Ruth Glacier, approximately 12 miles from the base of Mount McKinley. The aircraft was intact, resting on the glacier surface in an area of relatively flat snow. The helicopter landed approximately 150 feet from the ultralight. What the crew found has been documented in the investigation file, case number NTSB ANC 21 LA032. The aircraft was undamaged. The landing had been executed properly on the glacier surface, which was firm enough to support the ultralight's weight without the aircraft sinking significantly. The wings were level. The nose was oriented into the prevailing wind direction. The engine had run out of fuel. The tank was completely empty. The engine showed no signs of malfunction. It had simply run until the fuel was exhausted and then stopped. The pilot's seat was empty. Eric's flight suit, a heavy insulated garment designed for cold weather aviation, was draped over the back of the seat. His gloves were in the pocket of the flight suit. His helmet was on the floor of the cockpit. His survival pack, which he was known to always carry, was in its usual position behind the seat. The rescue crew examined the snow around the aircraft. The glacier surface in this area was covered by approximately 2 feet of packed snow that had fallen over the previous weeks. Such snow clearly shows any disturbance. There were no footprints. The rescue team leader, a 23-year veteran of Alaska search and rescue operations, wrote in his report, I walked a complete circle around the aircraft at a distance of approximately 50 feet. The snow surface shows no tracks of any kind leading away from the ultralight. I then walked a larger circle at approximately 150 feet. No tracks. We flew a search pattern over the surrounding glacier for approximately 45 minutes before deteriorating conditions forced us to return to base. No tracks were visible anywhere on the glacier within visual range of the aircraft. He continued, "In 23 years of search and rescue, I have never encountered a scene like this. A pilot does not land an aircraft on a glacier, remove his survival gear, and walk away without leaving footprints. The snow conditions were optimal for track preservation. If anyone had walked away from that aircraft, we would have seen it. No one walked away from that aircraft." The investigation explored multiple hypotheses. Could Eric have been picked up by another aircraft? No other aircraft had been reported in the area, and the snow showed no evidence of another landing. Could he have fallen into a crevasse? The glacier in that area was surveyed extensively. No crevasses were found within a quarter mile of the landing site, and any path to a crevasse would have left visible tracks. Could he have been taken by an animal? No animal tracks were present, and the predators capable of carrying a human, such as bears, would have been in hibernation in mid-March. None of the hypotheses explained the evidence. There was one additional finding that has received limited attention in official documentation. According to a source who participated in the investigation, when the ultralight was recovered and examined in detail, technicians found something unusual in the cockpit. On the instrument panel, below the altimeter, there was a pattern of what appeared to be frost. The frost formed a shape that the source described as almost like a handprint, but with too many fingers. The source would not elaborate further on this description. The frost was photographed, but melted before it could be sampled for analysis. The photographs have not been released. The case file contains a brief notation. Anomalous frost pattern observed on instrument panel. Photograph on file. Significance undetermined. Eric Lindqvist's wife, Anna, has continued to seek answers in the years since his disappearance. In an interview in 2023, she said, "Eric flew for 31 years without a single incident. He survived engine failures. He flew through storms. He landed safely every time. And then he lands perfectly on a glacier and disappears without a trace. No footprints. Nothing. His survival gear still in the plane. His flight suit still in the cockpit. As if he just evaporated. I do not understand. I will never understand. But I deserve to know what happened to my husband, and no one can tell me." The case remains open. Eric Lindqvist remains officially missing. The ultralight was recovered and returned to his family. Anna has reportedly kept it in a hangar, exactly as it was when it was found, waiting for answers that have not come. There was one additional detail about the Lindqvist case that emerged through informal channels. A source who works with the Civil Air Patrol told researchers that during the search for Eric, pilots reported unusual radio interference when flying near the area where his ultralight was found. The interference was described as a low-frequency pulsing that did not match any known transmission pattern. 3 separate aircraft reported the same interference on the same frequency. When they flew away from the glacier, the interference stopped. When they flew back toward it, the interference returned. The source stated, "We reported it to the FAA. They said it was probably atmospheric, something to do with the mountains. But I have flown in those mountains for 15 years. I have never heard anything like that before or since. And it only happened right there, right where that ultralight was sitting with nobody in it." The FAA has not publicly commented on these reports. No official investigation into the radio interference was conducted. The file number for the Lindqvist case is NTSB ANC 21LA032, with supplemental documentation under ISB 210315. Both remain classified as open investigations with no active leads. The geographic distribution of the cases in this part is notable. Gabriel Okonkwo disappeared in Canyonlands, in the remote Maze District. William Tran and the Ashworth family disappeared in Great Smoky Mountains, in the Lufty area of the park. Eric Lindqvist disappeared on the Ruth Glacier in Denali. These locations share common characteristics. All are remote, difficult to access, and far from regular human activity. All are in areas where other unexplained disappearances have occurred over the decades. All are in terrain that would be expected to preserve evidence of human movement. And in all three cases, despite terrain that should have shown clear evidence of where the missing went, no tracks were found, no trails, no indication of direction, as if the people simply ceased to exist in one location without continuing to exist in any other. Researchers who study unexplained disappearances have noted that pilots and passengers who vanish from aircraft often share certain characteristics with other missing persons in the same areas. They disappear suddenly, without warning. They leave belongings behind. They generate no evidence of where they went, and they are never found. Whether the mode of transportation matters, whether being in the air changes something about how or why people disappear, remains unknown. No official investigation has examined the question. No federal agency has acknowledged that such a pattern exists. But the families know. The families have connected with each other. Sandra Kowalczyk, whose husband disappeared from a helicopter in Yellowstone, has spoken with Anna Lindqvist, whose husband disappeared from an ultralight in Denali. Michael Reed, who lost his wife and in-laws from a balloon in Tennessee, has corresponded with Dr. Emmanuel Okonkwo, whose brother vanished from a paraglider in Utah. They have compared notes. They have shared documents. They have found the same anomalies appearing across cases that officially have nothing to do with each other. The missing time, the impossible evidence, the complete absence of tracks, the items that should not have been where they were found, the sounds that should not have been heard, the recordings that show nothing where something should have been. 3 more cases, 3 more aircraft, 8 more missing people. A paraglider pilot whose boots disappeared from a camera frame in less than a second, leaving no tracks on the desert mesa. A balloon pilot and 3 passengers who vanished from a basket while it descended, leaving champagne still cold and glasses still full. An ultralight pilot who landed on a glacier and walked away without leaving footprints in the snow, his flight suit still draped over his empty seat. The pattern continues. The evidence accumulates, and no explanation has been offered that accounts for what the investigators found. In Part 3, we examine what these cases have in common, the geographic patterns that researchers have identified, the official response to evidence that does not fit conventional explanations, and the families who continue to seek answers that no one seems willing or able to provide. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The aircraft are real. The disappearances are documented. And somewhere in the files of the FAA, the NTSB, and the National Park Service, there may be answers that no one has been willing to share. The pilots keep vanishing. The questions keep multiplying. Where are they going? What is taking them? And why can no one explain what the cameras and the evidence clearly show? 15 people, 6 aircraft, 0 explanations. This is not a summary of unsolved cases. This is a pattern that stretches across 6 national parks, 4 years, and thousands of pages of investigation documents that no federal agency has been willing to discuss publicly. The aircraft landed safely. The engines were shut down properly. The doors were closed. Personal belongings were left behind. And the people who had been aboard simply ceased to exist in any location that searchers could find. No bodies, no tracks. No evidence of where they went or how they left. Just empty cockpits and cabins in remote locations where no one should have been able to disappear without a trace. In Parts 1 and 2, we examined 6 cases in detail. A helicopter pilot and geologist who vanished from a meadow in Yellowstone. 5 people who disappeared from a Cessna on a gravel bar in Olympic National Park. A paraglider pilot whose boots vanished from a camera frame in Canyonlands. A balloon pilot and 3 passengers who left champagne still cold in their glasses in Great Smoky Mountains. An ultralight pilot who landed on a glacier in Denali and walked away without leaving footprints in the snow. Each case was investigated separately. Each investigation reached the same conclusion: unexplained. But when the cases are examined together, patterns emerge that individual investigations did not address. Similarities that cross jurisdictional boundaries, evidence that repeats in ways that cannot be coincidental, and questions that no one in any official capacity has been willing to answer. Subscribe now and turn on notifications. What follows has been assembled from documents obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests, court filings, interviews with family members and investigators, and analysis by independent researchers who have spent years trying to understand what is happening to pilots in America's national parks. The patterns are documented, the questions are real, and the answers remain hidden in files that federal agencies have refused to release. The first pattern involves time. In 4 of the 6 cases examined in this series, there is evidence of temporal anomalies that investigators noted but could not explain. In the Kowalczyk case in Yellowstone, the helicopter's flight recorder showed the aircraft transitioning from 8,400 feet to 4,200 feet instantaneously, with no descent recorded between the 2 altitudes. The data showed the aircraft at one position at one moment and at a completely different position the next moment, with no transition. In the Henderson case in Olympic, video footage from a passenger's phone showed the aircraft cabin empty while radar data indicated the plane was still in flight. The timeline suggested that the occupants were gone from the aircraft before it landed, an impossibility under any conventional understanding of how aircraft and passengers work. In the Okonkwo case in Canyonlands, the pilot's boots were visible in one frame of video footage and absent in the next, with no transitional movement recorded by a camera capturing 60 frames per second. The disappearance occurred in less than 1/60th of a second. In the Ashworth case in Great Smoky Mountains, champagne remained cold and carbonated for nearly 2 hours after being poured, defying the basic physics of thermal transfer and gas diffusion. Time appeared to have passed differently for the champagne than for the world around it. None of these anomalies have been explained. None of them have been publicly acknowledged by the agencies that documented them. They exist in case files as notations that lead nowhere, observations that prompted no follow-up investigation. A researcher named Dr. Helen Cartwright, a physicist at the University of Colorado who has studied unexplained phenomena in wilderness areas, reviewed the available documentation from these cases at the request of family members. Her analysis, completed in 2022, identified what she called a consistent signature of temporal discontinuity across multiple incidents. Dr. Cartwright wrote, "The evidence suggests that something is occurring at these locations that affects the normal progression of time as experienced by the missing individuals and as recorded by their equipment. The flight recorder data, the video timestamps, the physical state of objects like the champagne, all point to the same conclusion. Time is not behaving normally in these incidents. What is causing this abnormality, and where the affected individuals are going, I cannot determine from the available data. But the pattern is clear. Something is happening to time." Dr. Cartwright has since declined to discuss her analysis publicly. Through an intermediary, she stated that she received communications discouraging her from pursuing the research further. She would not identify the source of these communications. The second pattern involves sound. In 3 of the 6 cases, witnesses or recordings captured unusual audio phenomena immediately before or during the disappearances. In the Henderson case, the final radio transmission from pilot Raymond Esperanza was followed by what audio analysts described as a low-frequency pulse, lasting approximately 2 seconds. The pulse did not match any known transmission pattern or interference source. In the Lindqvist case in Denali, search aircraft reported unusual radio interference when approaching the location where the ultralight was found. The interference was described as a low-frequency pulsing that stopped when aircraft moved away from the site and resumed when they returned. In the Okonkwo case, the pilot stopped speaking mid-sentence at the 4-minute and 9-second mark of his recording. Analysis of the audio shows a barely perceptible low-frequency tone beginning approximately 2 seconds before his voice stops. The tone is at the edge of human hearing, approximately 18 Hz, and continues for approximately 7 seconds before fading. This detail was not included in the official NTSB report. It was discovered by an independent audio engineer hired by the Okonkwo family to analyze the GoPro footage. The engineer, who requested anonymity, told researchers, "There is something on that audio track that should not be there. It is not engine noise. It is not wind. It is a distinct tone at a frequency that humans can barely perceive, but that has documented effects on the human nervous system. Infrasound at that frequency can cause feelings of unease, disorientation, and, in some cases, visual disturbances. I do not know where it came from or what it means, but it is there, right before he stops talking, and I cannot explain it." The presence of infrasound in multiple cases has led some researchers to speculate about natural geological sources. Certain rock formations and underground structures can produce low-frequency sound under specific conditions, but no geological surveys have identified such sources at any of the disappearance locations. The third pattern involves physical evidence that should not exist. In the Kowalczyk case, investigators found approximately 4 ounces of fine gray sand beneath the pilot's seat. The sand did not match any geological formation within 1,000 miles of Yellowstone. Its composition remains unidentified. In the Lindqvist case, technicians found a frost pattern on the instrument panel that was described as resembling a handprint, but with too many fingers. The frost was photographed but melted before it could be analyzed. The photographs have not been released. In the Henderson case, the compression pattern on the gravel bar surrounding the Cessna extended 30 feet in all directions from the aircraft. The pattern was consistent with downward pressure rather than any force that could be explained by the aircraft's landing or the movement of people. These pieces of evidence were documented. They were photographed. They were noted in case files, and then they were ignored. No follow-up analysis was conducted on the sand from the Yellowstone helicopter. The compression pattern at Olympic was noted, but not investigated. The frost photographs from Denali remain sealed in evidence storage. When family members have asked about these findings, they have been told that the evidence is not considered relevant to the investigations. When researchers have filed FOIA requests for the documentation, they have been told that the materials are exempt from disclosure as part of ongoing law enforcement activities. The investigations are ongoing, but no one is investigating. The fourth pattern involves geography. The 6 cases in this series occurred in 6 different national parks: Yellowstone, Olympic, Canyonlands, Great Smoky Mountains, Denali, and 1 additional case that has not been previously discussed. On June 7, 2022, a gyrocopter was found on a remote plateau in Big Bend National Park in Texas. The pilot, a 63-year-old retired engineer named Thomas Brennan, was not aboard. His flight bag was in the cockpit. His water bottles were in the cup holders. His sunglasses were on the instrument panel. Thomas had been an aerospace engineer for 34 years before retiring. He built his own gyrocopter from a kit, a project that took him 3 years to complete. He had flown it for 4 years without incident, logging more than 600 hours in the aircraft he had built with his own hands. On the morning of June 7th, he departed from a private airstrip near Terlingua for a photography flight over the Chisos Mountains. He had made similar flights dozens of times. His wife expected him home by noon. When he did not return by 2 in the afternoon, his wife contacted local authorities. A Civil Air Patrol aircraft located the gyrocopter at 4:37 that afternoon. The gyrocopter had landed safely. The engine had been shut down properly. The rotor was stationary. There were no mechanical problems. There were no tracks leading away from the aircraft across the desert hardpan that would have shown clear evidence of foot traffic. Thomas's camera was still in the aircraft. It contained photographs from the flight, ending abruptly at 10:47 in the morning. The last photograph showed the view from approximately 2,000 feet above the desert. The next frame was blank. The camera's battery was fully charged. There was no technical reason for the photography to have stopped. Search teams covered more than 20 square miles over the following 2 weeks. Helicopters flew grid patterns over the plateau and surrounding terrain. Dogs were brought in, but as in other cases, could not establish a direction of travel from the aircraft. Thomas Brennan has never been found. His case number is ISB 220607. This brings the total to 7 aircraft and 16 missing people. Researchers who study unexplained disappearances have noted that each of these parks contains areas with histories of unusual incidents stretching back decades. The Beckler region of Yellowstone, the Hoh River drainage in Olympic, the Mays district of Canyonlands, the Lufty area of Great Smoky Mountains, the Ruth Glacier corridor in Denali, the Chizos Mountains of Big Bend. These are places where people have vanished on foot under circumstances that defy explanation. Hikers who disappeared from trails in clear view of companions. Campers who were gone from their tents by morning with no evidence of departure. Children who wandered away and were never found despite search efforts covering thousands of acres. The aviation cases appear to be part of a larger pattern. Whatever is happening on the ground in these locations is also happening in the air above them. A researcher named David Paulides, who has spent years documenting unexplained disappearances in national parks, noted the correlation in a 2022 interview. He stated, "I have documented more than 1,500 cases of people who have vanished in national parks under circumstances that cannot be explained. The cases share common characteristics. The disappearances are sudden, the missing are never found, the evidence does not make sense." When I learned about the aviation cases, I immediately recognized the pattern. The same areas, the same lack of tracks, the same impossible circumstances. The only difference is that these people were in the air instead of on the ground. Whatever is happening in these places does not seem to care whether you are walking or flying. Paulides noted that in several of the aviation cases, the landing sites were in areas that he had already flagged as locations of concern based on ground-level disappearances. The meadow in Yellowstone, where David Kowalczyk's helicopter landed, was within 2 miles of a location where a hiker vanished in 1997. The gravel bar in Olympic, where the Henderson family's Cessna was found, was less than a mile from where a camper disappeared in 2011. The mesa in Canyonlands, where Gabriel Okonkwo's Paraglider was discovered, was in the same district where 3 hikers vanished separately between 2008 and 2015. The correlation is statistically significant. The probability that these aircraft would randomly land in close proximity to other unexplained disappearance sites is less than 1 in 10,000, according to an analysis conducted by a statistician working with the family's coalition. The statistician, who requested anonymity due to concerns about professional repercussions, stated, "Either these pilots were specifically drawn to land in areas where other people have disappeared, or there is something about these specific locations that causes both ground-level and aerial disappearances. Neither explanation is conventional, neither explanation is comfortable, but the numbers do not lie." These are not random events occurring in random locations. There is a geographic specificity to this phenomenon that demands investigation. No official agency has acknowledged this connection. No investigation has examined whether the aviation disappearances share a common cause with the pedestrian disappearances in the same areas. The cases are handled by different agencies, classified under different categories, and never compared. But the families have compared them, and they have found that the same inexplicable elements appear whether the person was walking or flying. The official response to these cases follows its own pattern. Each investigation is handled separately. The FAA investigates the aviation aspects. The NTSB investigates potential mechanical factors. The National Park Service Investigative Services branch handles the missing persons elements. No single agency has authority over the entire case. No single agency has access to all the evidence. This fragmentation appears intentional. A former NTSB investigator, speaking on condition of anonymity, told researchers in 2023, "There is no mechanism for investigating cases that do not fit established categories. If an aircraft crashes, we know how to investigate that. If a person goes missing, the Park Service knows how to investigate that. But if an aircraft lands safely and everyone aboard disappears without a trace, there is no protocol. There is no category. The case gets split between agencies and none of them have responsibility for the parts that do not fit. The unexplained evidence falls through the cracks. I think that is by design. The source continued. I worked on one of these cases. I cannot say which one. What I saw in that file convinced me that someone, somewhere, knows more than they are telling. The evidence we collected pointed to something that none of us could explain. And then we were told to close our portion of the investigation and move on. No conclusions, no follow-up, just close the file and move on. I have never forgotten that. I never will. Multiple FOIA requests filed by family members and researchers have produced limited results. Documents are released with heavy redactions. Key evidence is withheld under exemptions for law enforcement and personal privacy. Photographs, audio recordings, and video footage remain sealed despite no apparent law enforcement justification. In 2023, the families of the missing formed an informal coalition to share information and coordinate legal efforts. The group includes Sandra Kowalczyk, whose husband David disappeared from a helicopter in Yellowstone; Anna Lindqvist, whose husband Eric disappeared from an ultralight in Denali; Dr. Emmanuel Okonkwo, whose brother Gabriel disappeared from a paraglider in Canyonlands; Michael Reed, whose wife and in-laws disappeared from a balloon in Great Smoky Mountains; and the Henderson family, who lost 4 members from a Cessna in Olympic National Park. Thomas Brennan's widow, Margaret, joined the coalition in late 2023 after learning about the other cases through independent research. Margaret had initially been told that her husband's case was unique, an isolated incident with no connection to other disappearances. When she discovered the pattern, she told researchers, "They told me Thomas was the only one. They told me it was unprecedented. And then I found out about the others, about all these other aircraft and all these other people who disappeared the same way. They knew. The investigators knew there were other cases. They knew there was a pattern, and they did not tell me. They let me believe my husband's disappearance was random, inexplicable, one of those things. It was not one of those things. It was one of many things, and someone decided I did not need to know that. The coalition has retained legal counsel and filed coordinated FOIA requests across multiple agencies. They have compared the documents they have obtained. They have identified the common patterns. They have demanded answers that no agency has been willing to provide. Their attorney, a former federal prosecutor named Rachel Whitmore, who now specializes in government transparency cases, has described the agency's response as systematic obstruction. Whitmore told researchers, "In 22 years of legal practice, I have never seen anything like the resistance we have encountered in these cases. Documents that should be routine are classified. Evidence that should be public is sealed. Requests that should be answered in weeks are pending for months. Every agency points to another agency. Every answer leads to another denial. Someone does not want these families to know what happened to their loved ones. Someone does not want the public to know that there is a pattern, and the legal mechanisms that are supposed to guarantee transparency are being used to maintain secrecy." The coalition has filed appeals with the Office of Government Information Services. They have contacted congressional oversight committees. They have spoken to journalists and documentary filmmakers. They have done everything that citizens are supposed to be able to do to obtain information from their government. The response has been silence. In a joint statement released in early 2024, the coalition wrote, "Our loved ones boarded aircraft in 6 different national parks. Those aircraft were found safely on the ground with no one aboard. Our loved ones were never found. The investigations documented evidence that cannot be explained. Sand that came from nowhere, frost in shapes that should not exist, sounds at frequencies that affect human consciousness, video showing people disappearing in fractions of a second, champagne that stayed cold for hours. This evidence was collected and then ignored. Our questions were noted and then dismissed. We have been told that the cases are still open, but we have seen no evidence that anyone is looking. We are asking for the truth, We are asking for the evidence that has been withheld. We are asking for someone, anyone in a position of authority to explain what happened to the 16 people who boarded aircraft in national parks and were never seen again. No agency has responded to the coalition's statement. No official has agreed to meet with the families. No additional documents have been released. The investigations remain officially open. The cases remain officially unsolved, and the questions remain officially unanswered. What do we know? We know that 7 aircraft have been found in national parks with their pilots and passengers missing. We know that all 7 aircraft landed safely with no mechanical problems. We know that in every case, personal belongings were left behind. We know that in no case were tracks or trails found leading away from the aircraft. We know that the evidence includes temporal anomalies that suggest time did not pass normally. We know that low-frequency sound was recorded or reported in multiple cases. We know that physical evidence was found that does not fit any known explanation, sand and frost patterns and compression marks that should not exist. We know that the locations where these disappearances occurred have histories of similar incidents involving people on the ground. We know that official investigations have documented the unexplained evidence, but have not investigated it. We know that requests for information have been denied or ignored. We know that 16 people are missing. We know that their families want answers. We know that no one has provided them. What do we not know? We do not know why the pilots landed where they did. In every case, the landing location was not on the planned route. In every case, the pilot deviated from their intended path to land in a remote area for no apparent reason. We do not know what the pilots saw or heard or experienced that made them land. The interrupted radio transmissions suggest that something happened, something that the pilots began to describe, but never finished describing. There is something. Hold on. I am currently at sentence fragments that end where explanations should begin. We do not know how people can exit aircraft without leaving tracks. We do not know how footprints can be visible in one video frame and absent in the next. We do not know how dogs can detect scent in a cockpit or basket, but cannot determine which direction the person went when they left. We do not know what causes temporal anomalies in flight recorder data. We do not know what creates frost patterns with too many fingers. We do not know where gray sand comes from when there is no gray sand for 1,000 miles. We do not know where 16 people went when they stepped out of aircraft and into whatever was waiting for them. The case files contain evidence. The evidence contains patterns. The patterns point to something that no official investigation has been willing to name. Something is happening in the skies above America's national parks. Something that causes aircraft to land in unplanned locations. Something that affects time and sound and the physical world in ways that investigators document but do not discuss. Something that causes people to vanish without footprints, without tracks, without any evidence of where they went. The aircraft keep landing. The cockpits keep being found empty. The evidence keeps accumulating in files that no one is willing to open. Sandra Kowalczyk still drives to Yellowstone every August, to the meadow where her husband's helicopter was found. She is not allowed to land there. The area is restricted. But she flies over it in a chartered plane and looks down at the grass where David landed and from which he disappeared. She told researchers, "I keep thinking that one day I will look down and see something. Something that explains it. Something that shows me where he went. I know that is not rational. I know that after 5 years there is nothing to see. But I cannot stop looking. I cannot stop hoping that somewhere, in some way, he is still there. That he went somewhere, and that maybe, somehow, he could come back." Anna Lindqvist kept her husband's ultralight in a hangar for 2 years after his disappearance. She finally sold it in 2023. The buyer was a collector who knew about the case. He told her he did not intend to fly it. He intended to preserve it. Anna said, "He asked me if I wanted to see it one more time before he took it away. I said no. I had looked at that plane every week for 2 years, hoping it would tell me something. It never did. It was just a machine. Whatever took Eric, it was not the plane. The plane was just where it happened, and I could not keep looking at where it happened without knowing why. Michael Reed has not visited Great Smoky Mountains since his wife and in-laws disappeared. He has not flown in any aircraft since that day. He told researchers that he is not afraid of flying. He is afraid of landing somewhere and not being able to leave. He said, "Christine loved to fly. She loved hot air balloons especially. She said they made her feel free. Now I think about what that word means. Free. Free to go wherever the wind takes you. Free to land wherever you want. Free to step out of the basket and go somewhere. I do not know where my wife went, but I know she did not choose to go there. Something took her. Something took all of them, and I will spend the rest of my life wondering what it was and where they are now." The balloon company that operated the flight went out of business in 2021. The owner told reporters that he could not continue operating after what happened. He could not put passengers in a basket and send them into the sky, knowing that he might never see them again. He said, "I have been flying balloons for 20 years. I have made thousands of flights. Nothing has ever happened." And then one morning, a balloon goes up with 4 people in it and comes down with nobody. The champagne is still cold, the glasses are still full, and the people are gone. How do you explain that to the next passengers who want to book a flight? How do you explain it to yourself? I could not. So I stopped. Dr. Emmanuel Okonkwo, Gabriel's brother, has taken a different approach. He has channeled his grief into research, spending hundreds of hours analyzing the evidence from his brother's case and the others. He has consulted with physicists, audio engineers, and specialists in unexplained phenomena. He told researchers, "My brother was a scientist at heart. He documented everything. He would want me to understand what happened to him. So I study the footage. I analyze the audio. I read every document I can obtain. And the more I learn, the less I understand." The evidence points to something that our science doesn't have words for. Time acting strangely. Space folding in ways it should not fold. People existing in one moment and not existing in the next without any transition. I am a physician. I believe in evidence and logic. And the evidence is telling me that something is happening that I cannot logically explain. He continued. Gabriel's camera recorded him being there, and then not being there. Less than 1 frame of video. 17 milliseconds. In 17 milliseconds, my brother went from standing beside his paraglider to being nowhere. Not walking away. Not falling. Not anything. Just gone. Where does a person go in 17 milliseconds? What can happen that fast? I do not know, but I will spend the rest of my life trying to find out. 7 aircraft, 16 people, 6 national parks, 4 years. The evidence is real. The patterns are documented. The questions remain. Why did the pilots land where they did? What did they see or hear that made them deviate from their routes? How can people disappear without leaving footprints? What causes time to behave abnormally around these events? What is the source of the low-frequency sound recorded at multiple sites? Where does the impossible evidence come from? The sand and the frost and the compression patterns. Why are these locations, these specific areas within the parks, the places where it keeps happening? And the question that underlies all the others, where did they go? The theories that have emerged outside official channels range from the conventional to the extraordinary. Some suggest that the pilots encountered medical emergencies and wandered away in states of confusion, though this does not explain the lack of tracks or the temporal anomalies. Some suggest predator attacks, though no predator has ever been documented that can take a person without leaving evidence. Some suggest elaborate staging, though no motive has been identified, and the technical expertise required to fake the evidence would be extraordinary. Other theories venture into territory that mainstream science does not acknowledge. Interdimensional phenomena, temporal displacement, things that live in remote places and have learned to take people without being seen. These theories cannot be proven, but they also cannot be disproven by evidence that itself defies conventional explanation. The families do not care about theories. They care about their missing loved ones. They care about answers that no one will provide. They care about evidence that exists but remains sealed. They care about the truth, whatever that truth might be. The official answer is that there is no answer. The investigations are ongoing. The cases are unsolved. The evidence is insufficient to reach conclusions. But the evidence exists. The patterns exist. The questions exist. And somewhere, in the files of the FAA and the NTSB and the National Park Service, there may be information that could provide answers. Information that has been collected and cataloged and sealed away. Information that families have requested and been denied. Information that researchers have sought and been blocked from obtaining. The truth is in those files. Or the truth is in the places where these people disappeared. Or the truth is somewhere that we do not have a name for. Somewhere that 16 people have gone, and from which none have returned. The aircraft are still out there, still flying over national parks. The pilots are still taking passengers to see mountains and canyons and glaciers from above. The sky is still vast and beautiful and full of places where helicopters can land, and small planes can touch down, and balloons can descend. And whatever took 16 people from 7 aircraft in 6 national parks is still out there too. Subscribe and turn on notifications. If you have information about any of the cases discussed in this series, contact the National Park Service Investigative Services Branch. If you have experienced anything unusual while flying over a national park, leave a comment below. The families are still waiting for answers. The investigators are no longer looking. The evidence is still sealed. And the pilots keep disappearing. 7 aircraft, 16 people, 0 explanations. Where are they? What took them? And when will it happen again?